Hey everyone, it's Asher and Dan from the Noise Sector here, and today we're introducing the first of what we hope is going to be a new series called Spotlight On. This week,
we're going to be talking about the C3 Strike Squad. Probably the most vanilla unit in the game of Beyond the Gates of Antares, but probably the most important for understanding the core mechanics of the rules.
also one of the most iconic. So,
Yeah, I mean, they're one of the first to be in plastic. They're in the Battle for Xylos box.
they're in the Strike on Kara 9.
Yeah, they're everywhere, and they're amazing value for money. They're excellent points to dollars ratio.
Absolutely.
And they're incredible on the tabletop.
And you're going to see them as the backbone of nearly every C3 army out there.
Yeah.
So what we thought is we'd shine a bit of a spotlight on them, go through their profile, how we see them used on the tabletop, and just talk about how we use them and just some little tips and tricks that we've come up with.
Yeah.
So, diving straight in, let's have a look at the profile
Let's check
here.
out the stat line. That's cool.
Yeah. So as we can see, just looking at the stat line, these guys are pretty average in a lot of respects. So, Ag 5, AC 5, Strength 5, it's all pretty vanilla.
Yeah.
The first time we get something interesting is when we get to the res, which is 5 bracket 7 because of their hyperlight armor.
Hyperlight's really amazing. It's probably the best armor you'll get. It's definitely the best armor on standard troops choice outside of a Gar battlesuit for something wearing armor.
I mean, Isaurian phase armor is also pretty cool, but hyperlight is it's an excellent armor.
The brackets denote the save that you'll normally be testing on. If they were just humans and they would be doing a standard save check, they'd be checking on 5. But because they have the hyperlight, they're normally going to be checking on 7s. If they're within 10 and getting shot at, that will go down a tiny smidge, down to 6. But they will get a +1 if it's against a blast. So if you've got hyperlight on your strike squad and you're getting hit by something exploding, you'll be testing on a res 8, which is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, it makes them really resilient to a lot of OH, fire, X launchers when they're firing on their normal explosive mode. And it means that sometimes troopers armed with X-Slings actually really want to think about whether they want to fire their blast weapons.
Yeah.
So it definitely gives them a bit of an extra tankiness against blast weapons there.
So moving on, their initiative is 7, which is excellent. Like fantastic response under fire if they have to do a reaction check, always good.
Yep.
And their command as well at 8. So they have a very high command, very high initiative, and a reasonably high res.
Yeah, so I mean they're not quite as steady under fire as Boromites are, but you know
it's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
They do the job. I mean, most sort of standard humans are command 8 with 9 on a captain or a leader, so they're pretty tough.
Command 8 is about standard for quality troops. Now, in terms of options, they have a spotter drone option for 10 points, which is something that I think basically we'll always take for reasons we'll go into in just a minute.
Yeah, you can also add 3 more troopers for 20 points each. You can have a sling net ammo on the captain, which is a cheeky choice that I always like to take. You can give them plasma grenades for 2 points a model, which we don't see very often, unfortunately. You can upgrade your leader to leader 2. Again, that's 10 points. Don't really see that happen often because they tend to be tanky enough.
And here's the big one.
You can exchange 1 trooper's plasma carbine for a plasma lance for 3 points.
3 points.
Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you?
The standard price for a strike squad is 112 points, but most people will run it at 125.
Absolutely. I mean, really, the joke is that a strike squad actually costs 125 points. Because you're paying the 3 points for a lance, because why wouldn't you? And then, because it's inaccurate, to get the maximum value out of that extra high power hit, you want to take the spotter drone.
Yeah, you drop the spotter, simple as that.
Yeah, so you're really looking at investing 125 points into a squad, and then the other option you're likely to see is Slingnet, because Dan, you're a big fan of Slingnet if you've got a cheeky 5 points left over.
So there's lots of different ways that you can get the most out of your strike squad. One of the best things you can do is use your plasma lance to split fire. We're going to go into this a little bit on the tabletop, and you'll actually see us doing some cool
little demos, just showing how they're used. But because the plasma lance has split fire, it means you can potentially put a pin on 2 separate enemy units, just because of that split fire. It's a bit of a gamble because the lance is only 1 shot and it's inaccurate, but that's what you have the spotter drone for. It makes it a lot more reliable.
For 10 points, that default 125 we talked about, being able to re-roll that dice on the lance, especially if it's inaccurate, it's a big deal.
So good.
And dovetailing into this is the 2-on-1 attack. When you have 2 squads of strike together, so 2-on-1 I like to call it, or 2-on-2 is even more effective, you can use the split fire to ping pins across the board, across the table. So you can have your strike squad firing its regular plasma carbines and its sling net ammo at 1 unit, and then you can have your lance fire another shot at a separate unit within distance. If you have 2 units doing that together, you can potentially shoot out 6 pins across 2 units, 3 pins apiece in a turn, and that's really dangerous.
Or you can stack 4 pins on one unit that you really hate and put 2 on another. I mean, that is assuming everything goes perfectly, but check out this little video on how we do that.
Demoing the 2 strike squads firing 6 pins trick if the dice go your way, using the commander with the X-Sling and the plasma carbines of the squad. You can hopefully rack up 2, yes that's right, 2 pins on the unit. Remember, you have to hit with one of the carbines and with the sling. If the sling hits but the carbines don't hit, you don't get that extra pin. You then split fire using the special rule on the lance to drop another shot onto the opposite unit. So you've thrown out 3 pins with that one squad. Now, if you can get your enemy in the right position and reposition in such a way to fire back, using your second squad, get your captain to fire his sling onto this unit, and then fire your carbines, pew, 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 and then you split fire the lance onto here. So that unit started with 1 pin before that shooting, and has gained 2 to go to 3. That one started with 2 and has gained 1 to go to 3. That's an excellent way to thin stuff out.
Now, it's also worth noting you can do that the other way around and potentially get 4 pins on one unit and 2 on another instead if there's a particularly dangerous unit like this Algaran assault squad that could potentially rip apart one of your squads in a close combat. If you really want to pin them down, you can potentially stack 4 pins on them in just 2 dice worth of activations. One final thing that, you know, is a bit of a sometimes food is whether you take a 6th man in the unit.
Yeah.
It gives them some extra resilience, especially for break tests, because they have to lose another guy before they test.
For an extra 20 points though, being able to just knock out an extra shot with a plasma carbine is really, really handy. Because if you're doing your rapid fire, that means your shots go from potentially 4 and a lance, or you can have 8 rapid fire and a lance, or you can have the lance rapid fire, and you can end up with 12 shots coming out of that unit at one time.
It's a fair bit of firepower.
I mean, it is a little bit expensive, but I found that in my own experience, running 3 squads of 6 can be much more effective than running 4 squads of 5.
But it's a counterbalance, because on one hand, you know, you're losing the die for having the other squad, but you know, you've still got enough points left to maybe take something like a cheeky X, launch a team, and the 3 strike squads you have, they gain that extra resilience.
And I mean, if you're going to do cheeky stuff, for 5 points, putting the X-Sling on the captain's fantastic. Being able to drop another pin on a unit. But you got to remember that that pin, like, you have to hit the unit with something else. The net is not enough to cause the pin.
On its own.
You're either going to be causing 2 pins or no pin at all.
Yeah. The downside is kind of that that's also one of the first upgrades to go. If you know you need to scrounge an extra 5 points somewhere, then the sling net, it's just like it gets the cut because it's not so vital.
Yeah.
So yeah, this has been our look at the C3 Strike Squad. One of the most iconic, one of the most vanilla, but I think one of the most reliable units in the game.
This has been our first spotlight, Noise Sector Spotlight on a unit. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've watched it. And make sure you check out all of our other videos, which should be over here, or over there, whichever side on YouTube it is.
One of those, anyway.
We'll figure it out when we get better at this. And any comments or queries below. And make sure that you're hitting us up on Facebook and you're asking us questions, because we really want to respond to what you're interested in and what we can do for you.
Absolutely. If you agree or disagree with us on how to use strike squads or have some extra suggestions, leave them in the comments below or hit us up on one of our many forms of contact.
Yeah. I've been Dan.
I've been Asher.
From the Noise Sector, and we'll see you again in space.
Signing off.